Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. Hope all your sessions have been going well with what you do so far. Today, we're going to be talking about an interesting conversation that a lot of times men are excluded from systems, and whether it's being fathers or being engaged in children's lives. And so we're going to talk about that as well as prevention. Um, I'm seeing quite a few people on here. If you could just put in the chat where you're from and who you are, that'd be great. I can see where our audience is from. I am Dr. Stewart Perrilliat. I am the executive director and founder of Man to Man. There's something at the very top that's blocking my.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
So today we're going to be talking about strengthening family, community. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go off the camera if that's okay.
Yeah. How's that? This color?
Okay, can everyone see what's on the screen? Okay, I see thumbs up. Great. Okay. So we're going to talk about us real briefly about what we do. We're a multifaceted program, and Man Urban Youth Advocate is a community-based nonprofit organization. We've been around for 30 years. We've worked in San Quentin, a rehabilitation center since 1995, and we strengthen men as a pathway to family stability and child well-being by providing emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, educational, fatherhood engagement, which is what we really specialize in, because we see that 90% of our social ills is because of absentee fathers and parenting support. Identity, we've noticed that young men and young women both struggle with identity because the identity comes from the dad most of the time, and it builds the structure and the foundation. We also do dignity center accountability, reentry, prevention, and what we want to specialize in today is talking about why this matters and why it's prevention. And we're going to give some examples of what we have done to prevent these issues in terms of ACEs. Men, particularly fathers, are often the first carriers of the family stress and least supported in prevention framework. Man-to-man works demonstrates that when men are supported early, families and systems benefit. There's a quote that says that it's easier to raise strong men than repair broken. It's easier to raise strong children than repair broken men. And I find myself repairing many broken men because that father figure has been missing.
I'm going to be adding a file to everyone for the chat. Just let them know I'm going to be, I'm adding a file to the chat for everyone so they can use this and have go along with the presentation. So just a second and that'll get downloaded to you, and you can go ahead and download that and use it today and keep it for future references. So here it comes. And go ahead and get that file in. That's your guide for today.
Meanwhile, I'm seeing we have Lake County and Joaquin Valley, uh, Modoc County, Baden, Amador, LA County. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining. So why men and fathers matter in prevention? And prevention doesn't start with systems, it starts with people. So most prevention efforts begin after families enter systems, whether it's court, child welfare, schools, emergency responses, or probation. By the point stress has already escalated into crisis, behavior has replaced understanding. And systems are responding to impact, not cause, and the cause is high for families and communities alike. We are working with Kaiser. Um, they wanted to know how maternal fatherhood initiatives will align with man to man, which I think is a great thing because I think we don't wait until the child is born, but we should start the process before the child is born and to assist the mom and to support her during that pregnancy. And a lot of times we don't know how to do that because we haven't been taught. And so this is something we consider part of the prevention model. This model starts earlier. It focuses on moments when stress first appears in relationships, finances, parenting identity, and belonging. When men and fathers are supported emotionally, relationally, and culturally, they are better equipped to regulate, respond, and lead as fathers stabilize, families stabilize, and conflict de escalates, and children feel safer. Like I said, I've been going into San Quentin Rehabilitation Center for almost 30 years, a little over 30 years, and this is what I see. Uh, Men that didn't have that foundation. They didn't have what they needed to navigate through life, and they made some bad decisions. And unfortunately, those bad decisions caused them to be in prison. But also, we have the mental health issues and anger issues and abandonment issues that we're going to talk about later on. And systems are engaged less often, not because needs are ignored, but because they are addressed before they become emergencies. This is a prevention as it was meant to be earlier, human, and effective. So we're going to have a little poll here, and we're going to see if you all can answer these questions, and then I'm going to come back and revisit your answers. It says poll. Can everyone see the polls? If you can just put a thumb up and let me know you can see it, or if you can't, okay, great. Thank you. Okay, great.
So for the poll, we're not able to do a poll in this, an official poll where you can go ahead and vote, but through these selections and just decide which one, um, where in your current role do the families most often enter systems first, and then we'll have a discussion about that.
Are people having trouble hearing?
Yes.
Are Dr. P, are you speaking? Can we see if we can hear you speak?
All right. Sorry about that. There's a little block. I don't know if you all see it on the screen, but we can't get rid of it. So, been trying to move that from the screen, but it keeps popping up. So we're just going to keep moving.
Okay.
In terms of what you all had in the pool, in your work, where do you see men or fathers showing up as a prevention? Victoria.
Good afternoon. I see them
Ah,
through child welfare.
child welfare. Okay. Thank you for sharing. And Phyllis?
Same, it would be through referrals that have come in from child welfare.
Child welfare. Okay. Gina.
I'm sorry, you caught me mid sneeze. Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. Where do you see men or fathers showing up as a prevention?
We see them here at First Five at our Dad and Me events.
And
We don't typically see them again until there's an interaction with CPS.
Mm, great. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
Uh-huh, no problem.
And Tim?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I did direct practice, but I would say probably in the search for fathers and their involvement in child and family team meetings.
Okay. Okay. And a lot of times when we talk about these things, we see that it has to take a crisis for these issues to happen. And so, where are they missing until the crisis? Jocelyn?
Yes.
Where are they missing until the crisis when we talk about this issue?
What are they missing?
Where are they missing? Yes, until the crisis. Like before the crisis, where are they?
I don't think I heard. I don't think I'm hearing you correctly.
Okay, I'm gonna come back. Lucille,
Let me just make sure. Do you say where are they missing or what are they missing before the crisis? Is that what you're saying?
yeah. So the first question was, where do you see men or fathers showing up as a prevention? And the second part is, where are they missing until crisis?
Um, hmm, where are they missing? I would just say more so just the lack of resources, uh lack of support.
Very good. Yeah, I agree. Lucia? Yes, Leticia.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
I work also parenting classes, and I would say then where are the I noticed that they're not showing up to, like somebody mentioned before, to any event, or where when there's family events, or be it either in school or any classes, and I think they're missing honestly at work. I feel like men are so overcharged with their work, and that's, I don't want to say is the excuse, but they kind of leave the responsibility to their mothers until there is a crisis, and it comes like, oh, I was just busy at work and providing, and now we're in a crisis where you were at.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing because that is true. And a lot of times we as men don't take advantage of or invest in ourselves because we don't think it's important. And it's very important because I always say we pay now, we pay later. You know, it's better to pay now, which I call damage control, than pay later. And then we have to see them in hospitals or, juvenile hall or prisons and jails. The prevention gap. Prevention is better than a cure. Men, particularly fathers, are often the first carriers of family stress, the least supported in prevention frameworks, Engage only after harm, conflict, or crisis. This is not about blame. It's about where prevention has been underutilized. When men are allowed, supported, and trained, they become protective factors, not risk factors. What the research shows is this father impact. Father's presence and engagements are associated with improved emotional regulation and behavior in children, lower rates of child maltreatment and neglect, better school engagement and academic outcomes, reduced involvement with juvenile justice and child welfare. Communities with high father absence experience higher ACE exposure, greater family stress and instability, and increased system involvement across generations. It is said that because of fatherlessness, 90% of our social ills is because of that, because of healthy fatherhood, father figures in their children's life. So I'm saying that if we can get the dads back in the family, supporting the children and the mom, they don't necessarily have to be together, but they need to work together for the sake of raising that child. ACEs impact higher risk profile. Here, child with more ACEs face long-term health, behavioral, and learning risks. There's chronic stress, not events. ACEs accumulate via ongoing toxic stress, not single incidents. Prevention gap. Early supports often miss chronic drivers, leaving needs unmet, and validating insights. What participants named aligns with ACEs patterns and impacts. So this prevention starts before the systems. And it looks like, it's flipped. It seems like the system starts, and then comes the prevention. And I'll give you an example. So many of these individuals that I deal with in San Quentin, if they had the right foundation, the right structure, the right teaching, 85% of them would not be in prison. But because they did not have that, they learn these things when they're incarcerated for 25 or 30 years. Every system entry has a before a removal, a suspension, a court case, a probation violation, a crisis call. There is almost always accumulated stress, mounting pressure, emotional overload, fear, shame, or disconnection. Prevention lives in that space. And now here's the cost. And I always tell these men that I work with and women that everything you do is going to cost you. Whether it's going to cost you money, it's going to cost you time, and sometimes it even costs you your life. Crisis response is far more expensive than early prevention and family stabilization. Every $1 invested in prevention yields $2 to $10 in savings across healthcare, justice, education, and social services. We deal with a lot of social services in various counties, and they bring these men and women to our program because this is what has happened in terms of the early family support program. For example, home visiting, saving $5 to $6 for every $1 invested by reducing child welfare, criminal justice, and emergency health care costs. We have acute crisis services cost significantly more per day than preventive supports. We have the psychiatric hospital, which is hospitalization, which is $450 to $500 a day. Supportive community housing, $40 to $60 a day. So prevention reduces system strain by lowering emergency room use, school disruptions, child welfare, involvement, and justice system contact. So the bottom line is this: investing upstream reduces avoidable crisis costs, improve outcomes, and keeps families intact. So what happens before systems respond? This short clip reflects the moment before families enter system. It's not about blame again, it's about stress, pressure, and missing support.
One day, as the carpenter was working, he looked out onto the river and saw a child trying to swim towards the shore. "Help," said the child. "The current is too strong." So the carpenter grabbed a boat and rescued the child. "How did you get into the river?" asked the carpenter. "I fell in upstream," said the child. The next day, when the carpenter looked out onto the river, he saw two children struggling to swim towards the shore. "Help," the children said. The carpenter called out to another villager, and together they rescued the children. But the next day, there were 5 children, and the next day, there were 12, and soon the whole village was busy rescuing children from the river. The villagers grew weary, and some of the boats started to leak and break from overuse. The carpenter worked tirelessly to repair them, but as the number of children in the river grew, soon there weren't even enough boats to get the job done. One day, the carpenter asked himself a question. Why and how are so many children falling into the river in the first place? So he bravely ran upstream to find out. There, he saw a big, windy village with many houses, and some of the houses were in a state of disrepair. And when the wind blew especially hard, the houses creaked and cracked, and things were swept out of them and into the nearby river. Sometimes what was swept up was children. The carpenter saw an old lady walking by. "Excuse me," he said to the old lady, "tell me, why are these houses so broken down? Why aren't these houses stronger?" "The people of this village want to fix these houses so that they can resist the wind," the old lady replied. "But we do not have the tools to do so, and the wind lately has been especially strong." "I can help," said the carpenter. And with the help of the old lady, he gathered the villagers, gave them his hammer, and taught them how to use it so that they could learn to make their houses strong when the wind blew especially hard and keep their children from falling into the river. Yay! Because you see, if we make the effort to go upstream and help build strong foundations there, we won't need to work so hard to rescue children downstream.
So what do you think this moment is really showing us about prevention? What happened here before anything needed to be fixed? You can just raise your hand and I'll call on you. No one? Well, let me share what it comes to my mind. That a lot of times we have what we call broken foundations. A house is built with a foundation. And if you know anything about building, everything builds upon that foundation. Now, a house can have all broken windows, and they would never condemn that house. It could have a hole in the roof. They would not condemn that house. It can have all the hinges off the doors, and never will they condemn that house. But if an inspector's seen a crack in the foundation, surely they will condemn that house. And that's what we're dealing with today. There's a lot of broke, cracked foundation. So ACE is chronic stress, not single events. Research on adverse childhood experiences shows long-term harm is driven by chronic unresolved stress, not isolated incidents. Prevention is prevention is most effective when stress is addressed before escalation, while outcomes are still changeable. What are ACEs and how do they relate to toxic stress? And I'm glad you asked because this is the thing that we deal with every single day. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. These experiences can include things like physical and emotional abuse, neglect, caregiver, mental illness, and household violence. The more ACEs a child experiences, the more likely he or she is to suffer from things like heart disease and diabetes, poor academic achievements, and substance abuse later in life. The core prevention tool is stress, reaction, and impact. Stress, what pressures or triggers shows up first, and these can be environmental, emotional, or situational factors that initiate the cycle. Reaction, how the body and the emotions respond, and this includes uh, psychological changes, emotional responses, and behavior shifts. The impact is how that response affects families, children, and systems, resulting in broader consequences for relationships and community well being. Well, one of the first things we do when we teach our classes is, especially when we deal with the men, because most of the time the men respond based on how they feel, which is an emotion. And a lot of times we tell them that those emotions is what causes stress, it causes reaction. And the impact is how they respond. So, for instance, I tell them emotions are temporary. Don't allow a temporary situation to turn into a permanent situation. So, the temporary is I felt this way. I felt disrespected. I felt jealous. I felt angry. Temporary. Positive situation, I mean, the permanent situation is now because of how you made me feel, I took your life. Stress. Stress is the pressure beneath the surface. For many men and fathers, stress includes financial instability or employment pressure, relationships or co-parenting conflict, parenting overwhelmed and fear of failure, identity strain and feeling judged, feeling unheard or powerless within systems, whether it's mediation or Department of Child Support Services, or when they go to the hospital, they feel like they're not existing there. There's no need for them. And a lot of times people don't understand that when even before a child is born, many men struggle with postpartum depression. And the part that they struggle with is the fact is I don't know if I'm going to be a good dad. Or what if I suck as a dad? I didn't have a dad and I didn't have a father in my life. And so what happens is they run from their situations because they stress themselves out before they even try. Stress is often unseen and unnamed, especially for men. Reaction. When stress is unmanaged, it does not disappear. It expresses itself. Common reactions include anger or irritability, emotional withdrawal or shutdown, avoidance of responsibility or systems, defensiveness or aggression. These are often labeled behavior problems, resistance, or noncompliance, but they are frequently stress responses. And I know we all have dealt with people like this, and we trying to figure it out. And why are they like this, or what are they doing, or they could deal with it a better way. Many of the guys that I work with say they were birthed into domestic violence, I mean, their mother was in domestic violence, their father was domestic violence, their neighbors dealt with it in terms of the culture, and they became what they were exposed to in terms of their environment. Impact. Unchecked reactions lead to real consequences. Children experience emotional instability or fear. Family relationships deteriorate. School engagement declines. System involvement increases. And by the time systems intervene, the original stressor is often no longer visible. Why this matters for systems? Downstream responses are far more costly than prevention. Early emotional regulation and caregiver support, it reduces repeat system involvement, lower long-term public costs, improve outcomes across health, education, and justice. Strengthening men early is both a human-centered strategy and a system strategy. This is upstream prevention, not emergency response. We created a book called the Man Book. And the Man Book is a book that teaches men stuff that they should have gotten from their dad. And, you know, when we talk about fatherhood, we can't even address the fatherhood until we address the manhood. Well, the manhood comes from the identity of the father. But if the father's not there, then we have a lot of men that have what we call misidentity. And they take on the form of what other people say that they are. The prevention opportunity. Men and fathers sit at a critical intersection between stress and stability, between reaction and regulation, between family breakdown and resilience. Supporting men is not separate from protecting children. It is one of the most effective ways to do so. So, man to man, the 4 pillars of men-centered prevention is this. This model is built on our condition for prevention, not programs or services. When men are supported to regulate stress, engage as fathers, develop identity and purpose, be accountable with dignity, families stabilize before crisis. I always say, and no disrespect to the women on this call, but there are many programs for women and many prisons for men. Strengthening men as prevention, primary prevention, focus on proactive measures rather than reacting to crisis. Community driven, built with input and leadership from local communities. Culturally grounded, respects and integrates cultural values and practices. And family stabilization aims to support families before stress becomes crisis. Emotional resilience. This is a quick definition. Recognize, regulate, and respond to stress before it becomes conflict or crisis. Many times, we don't even, as men, are aware of what it means to have self-awareness or self-regulation or even self-control. You know, one of the things that I say to the men is there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about a man who lacks self-control is like a city without walls. Another translation says, a man who lacks self-control is like a house with broken windows and no doors, which means anything can come in and anything can go out. Daily practice. Notice body stress signals. Name emotions without shame. Pause before reacting and use tools for anger, fear, and overwhelm. Why it prevents harm? Regulating emotions reduces spillovers into relationship, parenting, and behavior that can trigger system involvement. I'm telling you, this is the major thing in terms of our men that we have to deal with is that emotional piece. And we haven't been able to regulate that because we've been taught that we can't feel this way. We can't say how I'm embarrassed, or I can't do this, or shame or guilt, or all of these things, fear, and whatever happens here stays here. And so we create a space for us to shut down. And then when we shut down, we want to know what's wrong with you. Alignment. CPP addresses upstream family stress. Cal Ames, CS supports whole person stabilization. School wellness reduces behavior escalation tied to home stress. And maybe you may not know what Cal Ames is, but this is something that is working with the Department of Human Health Services. So we do warm handoffs with prisons and jails. When they come out, they send them to us as a referral. We work with them 90 days before they come out. When they come out, we get them their doctor's appointments, make sure they're on Medi-Cal. We make sure if they need housing navigation, if they need jobs, we give them that whole skill set and making sure that they're providing in these things that social services would normally do, but because social services doesn't have the bandwidth, they use lived experiences with people like us. Now, that's for the Department of Human Health Services, but for partnership and Kaiser, this is for anybody who needs housing, or if you're on Medi-Cal and you need doctor's appointment, you need transportation. This is reaching out to the community and providing those services for those individuals. When we talk about fatherhood engagement, definition, actively supporting fathers as stabilizing caregivers, not peripheral participants. What this looks like, helping men understand their impact on children, building confidence in parenting and co-parenting, reframing fatherhood and presence, consistency, responsibility, engaging fathers early, not only after systems involvement. And why this is a prevention is when fathers are supported, children experience safety, consistency, and emotional regulation. And when fathers are excluded or overwhelmed, stress transfers directly to the children. Alignment, here it is. CPP strengthens protective factor for children. Schools improve attendance, behavior, and engagement. And then we have the cross sector, bridges family systems, education, and community support. Back to this identity and purpose. Helping men develop a positive sense of identity, responsibility, and belonging. A lot of times these guys don't know who they are. And that creates a problem because when they don't know who they are, it's difficult for them to tell their children who they are. So what this looks like is this: exploring personal values and manhood narratives, replacing survival-based identity with purpose-driven identity, connecting responsibility to family and community impact, shifting from system-defined to self-defined roles. And why this is prevention? Men who don't see themselves as valuable contributors disengage. Disengagement leads to absence, and absence creates risk for your families. Alignment, CPP, building resilience and social emotional protective factors. Again, the Cal Ames supports long-term stabilization and engagement. Community pathways reduces isolation and system cycling. One of the things that we do in terms of working with the men in prison is we have a 90% recidivism. 100% recidivism. The people that come out of our program, that complete our program, never go back to prison. But that's because the mind is changed. And when we can change the mind, we can change the behavior. Now, I didn't say people who come to our class. I'm saying the people that complete the program, because this is giving them something, some tools that they can use, whether they're in prison or they're living back in society. Our goal is to get them prepared mentally to transition back into society. Culturally grounded accountability. Accountability rooted in culture, relationships, and growth, not punishment. And that's the problem that, many times we've been having with those that's in prison. Rather than rehabilitate these men and women, we punish them. And what happens is when they do go into the system, they just become better criminals because they really haven't been taught anything before they came in. What this looks like is accountability conversations that restore dignity, peer accountability within community norms, naming harm while supporting change, moving from compliance to responsibility. Now, why this is prevention? Punitive approaches create resistance, and culturally grounded accountability builds ownership, repair, and lasting behavior change. Alignment CPP reduces re traumatization and escalation. Probation, courts, supports change without re-entry, and cross-sector aligns expectation across systems. I'm sorry if I'm going fast. I got a lot to share and I'm trying to finish it in the time that we have. How the pillars work together, how upstream support prevents crisis. Emotional regulation, it builds awareness and self-control to stress is managed before reactions escalate. Identity, a strong sense of self and a role reinforced responsibility and long-term decision making fosters sustained responsibility and empowers positive change. The father engagement, active, present fathers increase stability, consistency, and emotional safety in the family. And then we have the accountability, clear expectation, coaching, and follow through, sustained behavior change over time. Together, these protective factors interrupt stress early, before families enter crisis or systems are engaged. Where this model lives, built into what already exists. No new programs or budgets required. This approach strengthens how existing services, families, and systems already respond to stress. Activated in real life moments. It embeds into everyday touch points, homes, schools, courts, health visits, reentry, and community settings. Used when outcomes are still flexible. Intervention happens early while stress is present, but before it hardens into crisis. Prevention is not an add on, it is a shift in timing, inserting support earlier, not expanding systems later. The bottom line here is the earlier support is applied, the less intervention is required. I hope I'm making sense here. County and agency settings. Prevention lives in conversations, not services. Intake conversations. Normalize stress, name early warning signs, and surface needs before they escalate into crisis. This is what I call damage control. We gonna damage prevention. We're gonna make sure we do this before the crisis exists. We don't wait and then try to fix it. We're gonna do it before it gets out of hand and gets out of control. The case reviews and staffing, identity repeating stress patterns across family, housing, employment, and relationships, not just compliance issues. Supervision and leadership practice, model emotional regulation, reflection practice, and calm decision making under pressure. Family meetings and case planning intentionally include fathers and father figures as stabilizing assets, not afterthoughts. Here's the impact. These moments reduce defensiveness, it increases trust, and it stabilizes families before escalation or system involvements occur. Now, if I ask you, now you don't have to raise your hand, but I know just about everybody on here. I already know the answer that I'm going to get, but I'm going to ask you anyway. If I ask you how many of you all honestly will answer this question and say you have trust issues, I can guarantee you more than 90% of the people that's in here, I've done this several times, that I know this is an issue. And it's a major issue when it pertains to dads and men. Here's another one that I want to talk about. Schools. Prevention lives before discipline, not after. Pause before punishment. Look beneath behavior to identify stress, trauma response, or unmet emotional needs before suspension or exclusion. Emotionally intelligent communication. Use calm, respectful, L-based language with uh, students and families to de-escalate situations and maintain EI-based language with students and families to de-escalate situations and maintain connection. The father engagement as partners. Intentionally include fathers and father figures in early problem solving, not only after discipline decisions are made, and then the co-regulation over control. This is what, but before we go to this one, a lot of times we as adults forget that we were children. And we don't have empathy. We don't have empathy for our children sometimes. We don't have empathy for our spouses because we just forget who we were and how we respond. And that's a part of that self-regulation and self-control. I know I was a single dad. My daughter came to live with me in the third grade. My son came to live with me in the sixth grade. It was hard. I was working on a master's degree, a doctorate, and trying to parent my children at the same time. And a lot of times they did things that didn't make sense. But then I had to reflect back to when I was that age and the things that I did, I'm sure didn't make sense. And they were way better than I was when I was their age. So this co-regulation over control, when adults model regulation, children learn to stabilize emotions and behavior more effectively. Again, the impact. Father involvement and early regulation reduce disruptions, improve safety, and keep students engaged and learning. I think I mentioned this earlier, but fatherlessness is the most destructive trend of our society. It's not drugs, it's not homicides, it's not incarceration, it's not high school dropouts, it's not drugs or poverty. Those are byproducts of the issue. The root cause is fatherlessness. Community and faith-based setting. Prevention is sustained through relationship and culture. Men groups building emotional resilience. Create consistent spaces where men practice regulation, reflection, and healthy response to stress. Again, when we start doing these classes, I make sure that this is a safe environment. I let people know that when you're in here, what says here stays here. That if a person wants to cry or he wants to do something, he's not going to be judged. And if anybody ridicules him and makes fun of him, they are kicked out, removed from the class, permanently, because this needs to be a place where men feel safe that they can be themselves. And I have taught for many years in prison that men have cried and said, "You got me here looking like a little, whatever you fill in the blank." And I'm saying, no, you're human, and humans have emotions. Parenting space, focus on regulation and repair. Teach caregivers how to de-escalate conflict, repair harm, and restore connection in real time. We have peer accountability rooted in dignity. Reinforce responsibility through respect, support, and shared standards, not punishment or shame. A lot of times we do this by lived experience. People that have experienced what these people experience. So people understand that, they're not the only one. And then they can see the change in this person's life and say, whoa, that's, something that can happen. Yeah, it can happen for me as well. But prevention workshops before crisis equip families with practical tools before stress escalates into emergency or system involvement. Again, the impact is these tools move beyond programs and they travel into homes, relationships, and everyday life. Here's the poll number 2. You're just going to answer because we have an issue with the poll. So it's a prevention gap. What's missing in prevention? So I want you to read the question, poll the question. Which prevention area is most under addressed in your system or community? You could put it in the chat. Emotional resilience, supporting men to recognize stress, regulate emotions, and respond before conflict. You guys get it, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. So I'm seeing all, but if need to choose, number 3, identity and purpose, emotional resilience, yes, all, actually, yes, all of them, um, all, but if I need to choose number 3, all, but choosing one, all, okay, all. I think I've seen some people that's not putting anything. That's okay. Discussion question. Which pillar, if strengthened earlier, could have prevented the last family crisis you encounter or experience? And then how? Pino,
The cultural
how you
base.
doing, sir?
Good, how are you? Yeah, I worked in prison programs for 20 years, and a lot of your curriculum sounds familiar. Dr. P, can you share what the P stands for?
Perrilliat.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a
what do
lot
we
of times
do?
they have a hard time pronouncing, so I said just call me Dr. P.
Yeah, no, much respect. Yeah, um, a lot of our issues are trauma-based and historically rooted in systems that discriminate highly against people of color and poor peoples are marginalized combinations. And um, in Nuevo Comienzo, we had the fortune to have Jerry Tello on the presentation before you. And they say, Nuestra cultura cura, our culture cures. And if we could go back to the value-based things that mi jefita, the little grandmother, or Big Mama, or so many of the our figures that really held us to our values, that were deeply culturally rooted in the things that built communities and resilience and healing and strength and taking care of one another. All of those things, I think, reclaiming. And I tell my elder, that I'm learning so much, and he says, "No, you're remembering."
Mm, mm.
So yeah, I think those things go hand in hand.
Thank you, sir. Beautiful.
My
I
honor. My
appreciate you
honor.
sharing.
Thank you.
Donna,
Yes,
I just want to ask you, I don't know, I just thought I asked you and then we'll move to the next
I
one. What do
loved
you
what he
think?
just said about your remembering. Like that was powerful. I feel like there's not enough done to engage dads, and we're in child welfare. I work in child welfare. We're like female dominated. I'm not a male, but I can only imagine how that would feel, like coming in contact with a system with all females and trying to be seen and understood. And I often feel like when I work in the program I supervise is a intensive in-home program trying to prevent kids from being removed. And it's not that their dads aren't there, but like someone said earlier, they're often working and there's cultural values around like gender roles. And so sometimes our system doesn't do enough to engage dads and to help them understand there maybe are things bubbling up to allow them to intervene before it becomes a system intervening, if that makes sense.
Right, absolutely. And what happens is a lot of times that, these men are working, so they don't have to deal with certain situations because they don't know how to deal with it. But their children are being neglected because of that. And they don't realize their children are being neglected until the crisis comes on. And so we have to, we teach these men, when you start feeling these back aches when you're on vacation and you feel certain things, and that's your body telling you something, but because you're not working, because we feel like we can work to solve everything. But these kids don't want the stuff you buy them, they want you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
The prevention interrupt framework. Emotional intelligence and action. Stress shows up before behavior. Reactions escalate systems, and skills interrupt cycles early. Interrupt earlier, stabilize families sooner. Name stress early. Surface rising tension before it escalates. That's self-awareness. That's, being able to call it and name it and to be able to identify it, not just because the person's just bad. Well, he's bad because of a reason. Maybe he's just acting out because he wants some attention. There's more to just the behavior. So we have to teach the pause to coach, brief, regulate, and reset steps. Validate, not excuse. Acknowledge feelings while holding limits. And a lot of times we men, and I'm definitely one of them, that I have to learn how to parent my kids. And my son, even though he's a young man, when he was growing up, he needed that nurturing and that love just like my daughter needed it. And so it wasn't that, he's not going to ask me for that hug like my daughter would just come up to me and just take it, So I have to go up to him and play with him and hug him just to give him that what he needs. And that validates, not excuse. Acknowledge feelings while holding limits. Redirect before consequences. Shift course before systems must respond. This tool doesn't excuse behavior. It prevents the conditions that leads to it. So we have stress, we have reaction, interruption, system avoiding. How early intervention prevents system involvement, stress, reaction, interruption, system avoiding. Stress emerges, financial pressure, relationship conflict, parenting challenges, are unmet basic needs. Automatic reaction, anger, withdrawal, shutdown are impulsive behavior driven by stress overload. Early interruption, simply practical tool, emotional regulation. communication pause, support check-in, and father engagement. System avoiding, court involvement, school exclusion, emergency services, or child welfare escalation. Here's an example. Financial stress leads to anger, emotional regulation tool applied early, court involvement avoided. The key insight here is small, timely interventions interrupt stress responses and it prevents large downstream consequences. Designing real prevention interventions. Name the moment. Identify the critical moment before system entry. For example, a call before removal, a missed court appointment. Name the stress. Uncover what's driving it. Shame, fear, financial pressure, or emotional overload. Who holds the power? Identify who's present and able to intervene. Caregiver, father, teacher, caseworker, or leader. And then choose the tools. Match a simple EI tool. Pause and regulate. Name emotions or dignity-based accountability. There's a guy, and I'll give you this real quick story of a guy that last week he was supposed to be in our domestic violence class. He was doing really well. He's staying clean and sober, and all of a sudden he decided to call me and tell me that he wasn't going to come to class because of his back. But I can hear in his voice that he didn't sound himself, and he had been drinking. And I told him, I said, well, even if you have back issues, I think you should still come because you're going to have the back issues whether you come to class or not. And to make a long story short, he went out, he drank, and he went to an area he shouldn't have, and he was on parole, and he got incarcerated. And he did, already did 42 weeks. He only had 10 weeks to go. These are the steps to intervention. We get those warning signs, but we ignore them. The moment before crisis. Effective prevention is intentional. Prevention doesn't happen by chance. It is designed, practiced, and repeated in everyday moments. Consistently ask, where does this stress show up first? Identify early signals. Emotional, behavior, financial, relational, before escalation. Who is present in that moment? Whether it's a parent, a father, teacher, caseworker, a coach, a peer. Prevention works when the right person is engaged early. That's the part that I grew up in terms of we being raised by a village. We had teachers that would come to your house and do house visits. We don't have that. We had parents that were other people's parents that was able to discipline us. So what tools fits best? Regulation strategies, communication pauses, father engagement, resource connection, or skill building. What outcome could be prevented? Suspension, court involvement, emergency response, child welfare, escalation, or family breakdown. And how can this be repeated consistently? Building into routines, supervision, meetings, and culture, not one-time responses. And here's the impact. Intervention prevention reduces crisis, lowers system involvement, and it strengthens long-term family stability. Final collaboration, build the intervention. Here's the purpose. Work together to design an early intervention that could realistically be used. And when you return to your work, families, or communities, this is not theoretical. This is something you could actually use. How this will work is you will be placed into breakout rooms. Group sizes were determined by the number of the participants, and there will be no more than 6 groups total. Each group will collaborate to build one early intervention. So your group task is using the prevention design worksheet shared in the chat. And it's there now as a downloadable PDF. You can identify a moment before families enter a system and name the stress driving that moment. Identify who is present and who can intervene. Select an emotional intelligence tool. Name the outcome, and this intervention could prevent. Decide how this could be repeated consistently. Sorry about that. Each group will return with one clear sentence before fill in the blank. We will use fill in the blank with blank and to prevent blank.
I'll jump in. We're group 2, but just in the sake of time, because I think we only have like a minute. Our sentence is, before the father becomes too stressed, we will utilize offers of help from family and friends with the father to prevent an incident of violence.
Perfect. All right, now group 2, we are really pressed. We got like 3 minutes.
That was group 2. I went out of order.
Oh, okay, that's okay. Group 1.
Maybe give
Group-
a name for who may have been in the group. I don't know if everybody recalls their exact group number.
Well, someone from your group, because I can't. It's like 70 people on. How about group 3? Cindy's in group 3?
Yeah, through through what we kind of talked about is just advancing that prevention in Tulare County, by equipping those fathers with the evidence-based informed tools and strengthening those families before challenges escalate. Creating that safe, stable, nurturing families.
Perfect. Which group was that? 3?
3. Yeah.
Okay. How about group 4? LaDonna?
Okay, yeah, I didn't know our group number.
It's okay.
So I'm gonna, based on our discussion, I'm gonna craft a sentence on the fly. Before arguments escalate between mother and father, we will use culturally grounded accountability with self-defined roles versus system-defined roles to prevent acts of violence.
Perfect. Thank you. Group 5? Jeanette, group 6? Or Leticia?
Janet, you want to do the resume?
No, you could go ahead and do it.
Okay, so we have different careers, but for me, immediately as a play group, big support as the first 5, like it's my dream to organize a first 5 group just for that, and just really kind of focus and break down the cultural and system functions of a man. But on that conversation, we also thought how hard is even to find a leader, somebody will guide a group of conversation for men. In my experience here, I tried this for years, but even professionals, psychologists, they don't feel capable to do that, to lead a group, then support, to be a guidance for men. So we just kind of linger on that and have a more extended conversation about that.
Thank you, Sharon.
And then group 1 go?
Group 1? Angela?
I think that was us. We said before the client loses his freedom, we will use individualized engagement strategies with the client and his sponsor to prevent relapse.
Perfect. Thank you all for sharing. This has been fruitful, and I'm sorry we're running out of time. But here's a reminder. This is not about perfection. This is about possibility. Small, repeatable actions create real change. This is what prevention looks like when it's built by the people closest to the work. So we will send the slides out, and then I'm going to give you all our QR code at the end. So if you want to reach out, check out our email or website. We're doing what is called a reimagining fatherhood convene, where we're going to have legislators, judges, policymakers in Sacramento in 2027. And we're going to change some of the laws and some of the policies and make it more father friendly. Again, we're going to empower the men to support the women. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone.